It was a Tuesday evening, about 9 p.m. My wife Angela and I had just finished watching an episode of NCIS where Gibbs and crew solved another murder and put the bad guy away. The episode ended, like so many others, with Gibbs in the basement working on another boat. He was joined by his friend and former FBI agent Tobias Fornell. As usual, Gibbs was chopping wood, and he and Toby were drinking Gibbs' favorite drink, bourbon laced with sawdust. I noticed that Angela wasn't paying much attention to the show. She seemed aloof and somewhat out of sorts, as she usually has been lately. She had been working more lately, staying late at work on Saturdays and evenings. Even when she was home, she was rarely seen around me, even though we physically lived in the same room. I had to speak several times to get her attention, and if she spoke, it was a short sentence, or sometimes just one word. Unusual for a woman who was once a non-stop talker. This imitation of the silence of the lambs had been going on for a month. I asked her several times what was keeping her so distracted, and she simply replied, "Just problems at work. It'll be over soon." Over the next month, I found her becoming more and more abrupt and being in a perpetually bad mood around me. I begged, pleaded, coaxed, and even yelled trying to get her to discuss her problem. The response I would get was "fuck you" or something similar, whereupon she would lash out and slam every door between us until she locked herself in our bedroom and I was alone in the guest room. Eventually, I just gave up and found something to occupy my evenings to avoid seeing my wife at all costs. I even decided to move into the guest room since she saw me spending more time there than in my bed. I even installed a lock on the door. She never once questioned my moving in, and I wasn't sure she even noticed it. The next 3 weeks became hell on earth when I realized she didn't even care enough to comment. After work, I started hitting up the local brew pub and spending hours at a time socializing with friends, silently cursing my wife for kicking me out of my own home. I took all my lunches with me. I really had no home life, nothing but misery, which was in endless abundance. The only exception was Tuesday nights, when I would come home after eating, sequester myself in my room, and watch the NCIS series on the TV I had set up in my room, specifically for that purpose. I realized that I couldn't stick to my current schedule because I was eating out every night, and it was becoming cost-prohibitive. I realized that something had to change and a decision had to be made. It seemed my wife was hell-bent on me divorcing her, and she had never been able to explain to me the reason for her behavior and mistreatment of me, transforming from a loving wife to a heartless cohabitant in 6 weeks. It was Thursday, and I was at Lou's place. Throwing darts with my team in a local league, I decided that I would meet her Friday night after work, and we would either work on her or our problems or end this sad sham of a marriage. When Friday night came, I stopped by Lou's for some refreshment in the form of a few cold beers. I ended up arriving home at 6:30 p.m., about 3 hours earlier than the usual 10:30 p.m. time I've been sticking to lately. I arrived home to a darkened house, which was unusual since Angela was usually home by 6 p.m. I enjoyed a brief respite from what I had planned for the evening and possibly the weekend. I grabbed a beer and sat down to wait. 6 beers and 4.5 hours later, Angela still hadn't come home. I checked my messages and voicemail, but there was nothing there. My calls went straight to voicemail. Messages went unanswered, and it looked like her phone was turned off. I called all of her family and close friends, but no one had heard from her or knew her whereabouts. I was too drunk to drive around looking for her, so I notified the police. "This is Tom Hollister, and I want to report my wife missing." A patrol car was sent to our house. The cops looked around for signs of foul play before taking my statement. They asked me about my whereabouts and if anyone could provide me with an alibi. I gave them my information, and the officers said they would check hospitals and the like to see if she had been in an accident and that the detectives would follow up with me. Around 3 in the morning, the phone rang and I screamed, "Angela!" It was the police. They found her car in the parking lot where she worked. In conjunction with her building's night security, they checked the premises, but she was nowhere to be found. Eventually, I resigned myself to the fact that it was time for me to go to bed. As I tiredly entered the bedroom, I noticed an envelope with my name on it lying between the pillows. I opened it and read the enclosed letter. Dear Tom, I deeply apologize for the way I have treated you for the past 6 weeks. It has been awful, and I am ashamed that I have made your life hell because of my predicament. The reason is simple yet complicated. I found myself attracted to another man. He's married. He has a family. He told me how beautiful and attractive I was and how much he wanted me sexually. I resisted, but I have to admit that I wanted him too. So far, I have been a faithful wife. Unfortunately, that would have to change over the course of this weekend. As I pondered a possible solution, it hit me. Gibbs. It was Rule 18 that solved my dilemma. It's better to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. So this weekend, I used Rule 18. I went away for the weekend with my lover. I'll be back on Sunday, and I'll apologize to you then. You are the only man I have ever experienced, and while it may seem superficial and self-centered, I wanted and needed to know, just once, what it was like to be with another man. After this weekend, I will be completely and solely committed to you. Once everything is resolved, I will atone for all the sins of this weekend and the last 6 weeks as we strive to get our lives back on track. It may seem confusing given my attitude and behavior, but I have missed you and continue to love you more than anything. Until Sunday night, and Angela, I collapsed on the bed and lost control of myself as my whole world crumbled before my eyes. She had been playing with this man and at least sharing intimate dates with him for the past 6 weeks. Judging by her mood and choice of words in her letter, she had practically slept with this man and was now planning to make amends. After coming to my senses, I called the police and reported that my wife was safe. The sergeant inquired about her whereabouts. I told him that they were still unknown, but she had left a note stating that she had gone away for the weekend with a man unknown to me and understandably refused to leave me that information. As I hung up the phone, I realized I needed a plan of action. A deep sense of hurt and loss remained, but it was pushed to the back burner in favor of simmering, unbridled anger. I was so emotionally distraught that I believed at that moment, if they had remained in my sight, I would have killed them both with my bare hands. I was outraged that this interference had robbed me of 6 weeks of my life and marriage and that she had allowed this to happen. I was even more outraged that by this time she had already broken the covenants of the marriage, had slept with him, and was probably still having sex with him so as not to waste a precious second. I rushed into the kitchen, a room I'd passed in the dark 1,000 times before, but today I managed to trip over the small kitchen table where we'd had coffee and breakfast for years. I managed to find the light switch and turn it on as an endless stream of swear words rang out of my hole. I continued my blue diatribe as I brewed extremely strong coffee. While the coffee brewed, I waddled back up the stairs to take a hot shower, hoping to beat the fatigue. I used the time to think through a plan of action, and by the time I turned off the water, the shower and bathroom were misting with a thick cloud of steam, and the condensation was causing droplets to form on the mirrors, doors, and walls, and those droplets turned into rivulets that cascaded down the mirrors, walls, and doors. The shower helped me focus. My mind became unusually clear, and amidst the fog, I formulated a plan. After drying off and dressing, I returned to the kitchen and poured myself a mug in a Gibbs Rule mug. I stroked the smooth porcelain surface and soaked up its warmth. As I slowly sipped the life-affirming nectar and absorbed the much-needed caffeine, I realized that Angela had been right. The Gibbs rules had spoken to me as well, and now I knew exactly how I needed to proceed. I pulled out a yellow notepad and pen from my den and made a list of everything I needed to do on it. Once finished, I began to set everything in motion. Once a decent hour arrived, I made extra calls to family and friends I had called in a panic the night before and gave them the okay. I was intentionally vague and simply said that she had left for work urgently and left me a note on the bed, which I didn't find until the early morning hours. Breathing a sigh of relief, they berated me for pushing the panic button. I accepted their criticism in the spirit in which it was delivered, but still accused her of making me look like a buffoon. I then proceeded to execute my plan. First, I made arrangements with the moving company for tomorrow morning. Then I called one of those investors who do quick real estate sales. He informed me that he would be coming over later that morning to give me an appraisal. I told him that I needed the deal done by Monday. He snorted a little, but I told him that it was basically a hot sale, and once he saw the house, he would make every effort to make it happen. I added that he would need to contact the appraiser, inspectors, and so on. He informed me that he was doing it all himself, and that if the title check showed that it was unencumbered, he would do it on Monday. I then went to my bank and withdrew $2,000 in cash until a new debit card could be issued from my checking and savings accounts. I asked them to give me a cashier's check for the balance of my share of our accounts. I then called my boss and explained why I needed a vacation for a couple weeks. Fortunately, I've worked at this firm for the past 20 years, and my boss appreciated that I always pull my share of the load, and then some more, and then some more. His words, not mine. I work as a tax accountant, and tax season is always an ordeal. Fortunately, tax season had already passed, and we were in that lull where things slowed down a lot. People mistakenly believed that waiting until 11 o'clock to file would maximize their cash flow. In reality, it was leading to 12 14-hour workdays for accountants who had to deal with masses of receipts that were disheveled and disorganized, and then sort through their files to provide the client, and more importantly, the IRS with accurately prepared returns that minimize the likelihood of an audit and maximize the client's refund. Today, my dedication was rewarded and repaid in full. My supervisor even logged in and transferred my direct deposit to a new account as soon as I had an account number. He also took Angela off my health and life insurance and retirement accounts. I called and rented a storage unit where Angela's belongings would be stored. After lunch, I got busy checking out apartments. After finding a place I liked, I spent almost all the cash I had on deposit. I had to run to the nearest store to buy a money order, which I used for the deposit. I didn't want to write a check as that would alert her, and she would find out where I had moved to. I set a moving date for tomorrow. I spent the rest of the day at home packing personal belongings and a couple suitcases. I left the rest to the movers. I called my brother Frank and swore him to secrecy until Monday. He gave me some cash to have enough for 7 to 10 days when my debit card arrived. I went online, opened an online checking account, funded it electronically, ordered checks and a debit card, and gave them my new address. I emailed the account number to my boss. I used my work credit card that I had for expenses, such as client lunches, so as not to leave a paper trail for Angela, since my boss suggested I do that. I assumed that Angela would text me when she was coming home and let me know the time she planned to arrive. I decided that I would call my daughter as soon as I got that text from her so she wouldn't alert her mother in advance. By late afternoon, I was tired and hungry. I went down to Lou's to eat a bowl of chili and drink a couple beers. When I got home around 8 p.m., I took a long, hot shower and then watched a rerun of NCIS before heading to bed, as I knew tomorrow was going to be a long and difficult day. I woke up with the onset of dawn with small rays of sunlight coming through the curtains in my bedroom. I knew the movers I'd hired would arrive at 7. I went down to the kitchen, and though it was still relatively dark, regained my ability to navigate blindly and avoided tripping my fingers on the table legs. I brewed a strong cup of coffee and, with mug in hand, headed to the bedroom to get dressed for the day. After loading the clothes left in the closet into the car, I drove to our bank, where I withdrew money from our joint account to pay for the movers to move Angela's belongings into storage and the monthly storage fee for her apartment. I didn't see any good reason why I needed to pay for her. I grabbed a bagel and a donut, along with another cup of coffee, a pitcher of coffee, and 24 donuts for the movers, courtesy of Angela, and headed home. The movers arrived and packed up by 9 in the morning. I picked up my bed from the guest room, as well as my dresser and new TV. I made a note to stop by and buy a coffee maker and kitchen and dining utensils for the new place. I followed the movers to Angela's pantry and unlocked it for them. I gave the movers instructions and a spare key to my new apartment. I pointed out to them where to put the boxes. They knew they needed to set up the bed and put the dresser in the bedroom. I asked them to leave the key on the kitchen table since the door might be locked from the inside when they left. I had to meet the locksmith at the house at 10, and the potential buyer of the house was due at 11, so I hurried back to the house, grabbing another coffee. I got in the car, and as I sipped my 4th cup of coffee of the day, I saw a van pull up in the driveway. The men from Speedy Locks had installed new locks, reprogrammed the garage door remote, and finished the job in less than an hour. They handed me the new keys just as John Newsom from We Buy Everything pulled up and got out of his car with a notebook and clipboard in hand. I told him about my decision to sell the house, and he understood. He told me that the title check showed it to be free and clear, so he inspected the house and found everything in order. He then made me an offer, considerably less than I would have gotten if I had waited and put the house on the market with the help of a realtor, but quite reasonable and suitable for my purposes. Fortunately, I had bought the house before I was married, and it was titled in my name only. I told him I agreed to all the terms in principle, only if he agreed to pay me in cash an amount greater than what I owed on the mortgage. He agreed. I asked him to hold the money until my divorce was finalized and then give me a check. He agreed to do so. He told me that he went through a nasty divorce and had his shirt off right away. The remaining money would go directly to the bank to pay off the mortgage. Monday morning, he would put the house on the market as if he had flipped it. I signed the papers on the countertop, we shook hands, and he left. I took one last look around the house. I was grieving the loss of my home, and as I looked at it, I felt a surge of anger at Angela for ruining our life together. Closing the door one last time, I hoped the new owners would be better off. Before leaving, I taped an envelope addressed to Angela to the door. As I was getting in the car, Angela texted me and said she was on her way home and should be there by 2 p.m. It was 12:10 p.m. when I got in the car. I stopped by the local Walmart and bought everything I needed for home improvement. On Monday, I planned to buy new furniture for my apartment. Today, I'll make do with a lawn chair. At least I had a bed and TV. I put away the groceries I bought, washed the dishes, and put the coffee pot on. I made a sandwich and opened a beer to wash it down. It was 1:55 p.m., and I called my daughter Julie, explained what had happened, and broke the news to her about my impending divorce from her mother. She was beating hysterically, wailing about how I had to forgive her mother. I told her that was simply not possible. I apologized for the pain she was feeling and told her that despite the divorce, we both loved her, and that would never change. I talked to Julie on the phone for about 15 minutes. Enough time had passed that Angela had time to read my letter. A few seconds after I hung up, my phone exploded. I just turned it off, enjoying my sandwich and beer. Damned if it didn't taste just like the other one. The letter? What words of wisdom had I left for Angela? What explanation did I leave as to why I left after she ruined our marriage? It was not my pearl of wisdom, but that of the great American philosopher Leroy Jethro Gibbs. I wrote, Angela, Rule 18 supersedes Rule 1. Never screw over your partner. You tricked me when you screwed that handy-dandy. And finally, Rule 42 applies here. Never accept an apology from someone who just hit you. Goodbye, Andrew. Epilogue. I avoided any contact with Angela, and even years after the anger and resentment had subsided, a deep sense of hurt remained. Her numerous attempts to talk to me proved futile. She even went around my apartment, but I refused to stop and talk to her. In the end, it cost me my relationship with my daughter and grandchildren. I refused to share the same space with Angela, If she showed up at a party, holiday party, or while I was visiting her, I simply left. Unfortunately, Julie sided with her mother and felt that I remained too inflexible in my stubborn refusal to forgive her and reconcile. My only role in Julie's wedding was to pay for it. About 2 weeks before the wedding, she changed her mind and decided that she would let me walk her down the aisle and marry her. As soon as I walked her down the aisle, the priest said, "Who gives this woman the right to marry?" I simply answered him, "I do." Angela looked shocked when I turned around, and instead of taking the seat next to her, I walked out of the church, skipped the reception, and went home. I visited at times when I knew for sure Angela wouldn't be there, even though Julie kept telling me to give my mother a break. I was kept away from the holidays as Julie in no way wanted to exclude her mother. So when the grandchildren arrived, I would visit them and hoped that Julie would relent and alternate them on major holidays. However, she informed me that her mother was and would be involved in the holidays, and frankly told me that if I couldn't put up with it, then let her not come at all. She got her way. A couple years later, she tried to get back into it. I told her I was used to living and being alone, especially on holidays, and not to worry. I wished them all a good life. Shortly after that call, I moved to another city and started a new life. I left no forwarding address. I dated, but no longer wanted to get into any serious relationships. I also started a new career and became a forensic accountant in my new town. Like Gibbs for many seasons, I was now helping put behind bars the vast number of scumbags who prey on and hurt innocent people. Also, like Gibbs, I lived alone and rarely socialized with anyone. I retired at the age of 70, and one day there was a knock on my door. When I answered, 2 young men about 25 years old appeared. I faintly recognized them but could not locate them. Even though the NCIS series had long since disappeared from the airwaves and I had long since disappeared from my family's lives, I still realized when they said in unison, "Hi, Grandpa. We're here to take advantage of Rule 5, don't waste the good stuff."